Hello, everybody. Welcome once again to Counselor's Couch 101. I am Jim Stump, and today I thought I'd do something just slightly different. I'll tell you a story that I heard way back when. Now, after I heard this story, I shared the story in a small church gathering. And after I told the story, a gentleman came up to me and said, "That'd make a great movie. You should, have it done as a movie." I said, "Great, but I don't know any movie producers, and I don't know anybody in the film industry. I don't know how I'd get that done, but it's a great idea, right?" And then a couple of years after that, I told the story again at a different church to a much larger audience. And afterwards, the lady came up to me and she started talking about it. And she said I should print it up in a book. And I said, "Well, what would I call it?" And she said, "Call it Christmas Oranges." And I thought to myself, that's a good title. I thought about what she said and I mulled it over for a time. And then after a while, I don't know if it was a year or so, I decided to take her up on the idea and I wrote it up and I had it printed up. There's a copy of it there. It's on CreateSpace on Amazon. I can give you the link if you want, but I will show you the cover of the book here. Let me just pause this and turn this around. I'll show you the cover. There's the cover of the book, as you might be able to find it on CreateSpace on Amazon. I'll put the address in a comment below the video here. This book actually had 4 different covers on it. I was working with a lady who thought that different covers would appeal to different audiences, so she created different covers. And this is the one I like the best out of all the 4 covers. But this is what you can find if you look for it on CreateSpace on Amazon. I'm not going to read the book straight out as it's written. I'm give you more or less a shortened version of it. But it's a true story, and this is how it goes. I was visiting a convalescent home back in those days, and I was there in business to go see someone and discuss some things. And as I was walking down the hall, I saw a gentleman sitting out on a patio. And I had known him because I'd been in that building before, and I just, met a lot of the people there. And so he kind of waved at me, and I waved back, said, "Hey, Steve, how's it going?" And he motioned for me to come out and sit down next to him on the patio, out on the patio. Excuse me. So I really didn't want to take the time. I had things to do, and I had other places to go that afternoon. But I knew that the number one product of a convalescent home is loneliness. So I thought, hey, I'll go sit with the guy for a few minutes, and pass the time of day, see what's going on. So I went outside and I sat down. He was eating orange, and he handed me an orange. He says, "Take this." And he says, "It's a great orange. You're going to love it." I didn't really want the orange, but once again, trying to be polite, trying to give this guy some attention and some human contact. I took the orange and I started to eat it, and it was a delicious orange. And he said, "That's a special orange." And I thought to myself, special orange, it's a good orange, no doubt about that. But what made it special? And he told me, "That's a Christmas orange," right? It was that time of year, it was in the fall. He said it was a Christmas orange. Then he told me the following story. He said in 1940, he was 20 years old, and he was working for one of those public works projects that FDR was doing, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The president created these jobs programs to give people work because everybody was out of work in those days. So Steve had this job, and he was with this crew that was going up and down some river out in the Tennessee Valley, I think it was. I've forgotten a lot of the particulars. By the way, I tried to change a bunch of the names in the story if you happen to get it, because I didn't want to get sued by anybody. So I tried to change the names and the places of the story, but to give you the gist of it. Anyway, Steve, 1940, he was on this work crew working along the rivers and somewhere in Tennessee, I believe, and they were shoring up the sides of the rivers where the water had overflowed the banks and created damage like that. That was the kind of work they were doing. And they went to this little town somewhere, I think it was called Sandy Fork, something like that. And they were going to stay there a few weeks and work on this project, and it was around Christmas time. And they had a barracks there set up for the workers, so that's where they were staying. Well, after these guys would work all day long, they'd come back to the barracks and to the small town and like that. And they would hang out in the pub and, get dinner and talk and throw darts or whatever the heck they did back in those days. And he met the owner of a small, like, grocery store. Now, the owner said to him that he wanted to construct a storage bin or building a shed sort of a thing out in the back. And he said, I have all the materials that anyone would need. I just need a worker who knows how to put that shed together, right? And Steve was thinking to himself, yeah, pick up some extra money. I can do that, no problem. He was good with his hands. So he made a deal with the store owner. And the store owner said, hey, one proviso, if you don't finish the project, I'm not going to pay you. It has to be done before I pay you. And Steve said, no problem. I can deal with that. So he went to work all day long, and in the evenings when he came back, he started constructing the storage shed, right? Small building, actually. And as they got closer and closer to Christmas, it was about December 23rd, and they were going to stay there over the next few days and go to a new job after Christmas, right? So Steve went up to the store owner and said, hey, I finished the building. Where's my pay, right? The store owner looked at him, and he looked at him, shook his head sadly and said, it's hard times right now. It's a depression. No one's working. I don't have the money to pay you. And right then and there, Steve realized that he had been cheated, right? The store owner never expected to pay him because he figured Steve will never finish this building. I'll just get a whole bunch of free work out of this guy, and then he'll be on his way, and I don't have to pay him anything. Steve realized he had been cheated, right? And he thought to himself, well, I can sit here and argue with this guy, but I can't hang around and wait for the guy to come up with the money. I certainly can't get a lawyer to sue him or anything like that. So I'm just going to have to work something else out with the guy. And the store owner says, I have no money, but, I have these crates of oranges here. I can give you 3 crates of oranges for your pay, and instead of your pay. Steve thought about it, and he got a wild idea, and he said, yeah, okay, I'll take it. He said, as long as you throw in this stack of Christmas cards. Now, at that time, they had the store owner had a stack of, 100 Christmas cards or something like that tied up in a ribbon. And so the owner said, yeah, you can have the crates of oranges and the stack of Christmas cards, and we'll call it even. So Steve's idea was he was going to have the next day off, which happened to be December 24th. He figured he'd go out and he'd give an orange to every single person in that little town that they were staying in, right, as a Christmas present. So he set out bright and early the next day, walking around the town. He'd knock on the door. He'd ask how many people live there, and he would hand them a Christmas card, and he would say, here's some oranges for Christmas, have a wonderful Christmas, and like that. He did that all day long, giving out these oranges to everyone he could meet. And finally, at the end of the day, on December 24th, it was dark, and he was stopping at the pub to get dinner like they always did. And he was talking to the guy, the pub proprietor, and the guy said, I noticed you gave out oranges to everybody in town. And Steve says, yeah, I got every one of them, and I've got 5 left over. I think I can take them for myself, and I'll eat them, right? And the pub owner said, something, there's another family you may not have come across, he said. And Steve said, yeah, where? He said, well, it's across the river. If you go across this river right over here, and you see that road up there, just follow that road, go up to the top of the hill and head out. He said, you can't miss the house. It's the only one up there, right? So Steve thought to himself, okay, I'll go tomorrow morning, which is Christmas morning. He said, I'll get up bright and early, and I'll get across the river. I'll go up that road, and I'll deliver these oranges and get back in time for the gathering they were going to have for Christmas. They're going to have a Christmas dinner with a big group of people from a local church, right? Steve thought he could go and deliver the oranges and get back in time for that. Well, that night, December 24th, going into the 25th, it snowed, and there was snow all over the place. When Steve woke up bright and early the next day, he saw all that snow, but he was 20 years old, and he was full of vigor and vim and vigor, and he was going to deliver these oranges. He just made up his mind he was going to do this. So he crossed the river, he went up that road, and he said sometimes the drifts were up to his chest. I don't know if it was that high or not, but that's what he said it was. A lot of snow. And he was just like plowing his way up this road, went up to the top of the hill, and made his way down that road between the forest and so forth. And he said he turned a corner, and he came upon the most beautiful sight he'd ever seen. It was like a Currier and Ives painting, he said. There was a paddock over here. There was a barn. There was a stable over there for the animals. There was a garage over here. There were fruit trees planted along this way. And he said there was a beautiful farmhouse sitting there, a big, large farmhouse. And he thought to himself, these people are wealthy. They certainly don't need these silly oranges I'm bringing to them. And as he looked at all that beautiful property and the buildings and so forth, and the idyllic scene all set in snow, he started to get depressed. He was feeling badly about himself because he didn't have anything, right? He's working for public works projects. He wasn't making much money. But he said he was going to deliver the oranges, so that's what he did. He made his way over to the porch. Normally, he would knock on the door, ask how many people were there, and he'd count out the oranges and give them to them, right? But this time, he was embarrassed because he was wet and filthy and penniless, and he didn't want to see anybody at that point in that condition. So he put the 5 oranges on the porch, and on top of it, he put a Christmas card. Then he turned around and he left, right? Went back down the hill, went back across the river. By the time he got down there, he saw that the gathering and the dinner that everybody was having was pretty much halfway over or more, right? And he was all wet and filthy and cold, and he just didn't want to be around anybody because he was feeling badly about himself. So Steve took a hot shower and went to bed and said he was just going to sleep away until the next day because he was sad and depressed. He just didn't want to deal with anybody at that point. The next morning, December 26th, Steve got up, walked out of the barracks, got in the back of a truck, and they drove away, and they never saw that little town again, right? Well, Steve went on to work other projects in public works and like that, and then along came a war, right? World War II. Steve was drafted into the Army, and when he was in there, he volunteered for the Army Air Corps. The military trained him and sent him over to England. He became a crew chief for the bombers that were flying out of there, right? After the war was over, the military brought Steve back to the United States. They gave him an honorable discharge and a GI Bill. And Steve came out here to Southern California to get a job in what was then known as the aviation industry, right? Well, he got a job. He met a woman, fell in love, got married, bought a house over in Inglewood, and settled down and started raising a family. Years went by, years. 1956, he said, long about Christmas time. Steve went out to get the mail, pulled the door open, and he said he reached inside and he found a box. He said it was about 4 inches square. He said there was no return address on it, nothing indicating who it was from, and it just said Steve, Inglewood, California. So he opened it up, and inside he found an orange. And he said he thought of Sandy Fork and that trip and that Christmas, but there was no way to connect any of it, no way to contact the person who had sent him the orange. So he just went about his business. Another year went by. Another Christmas came up. Steve went out to get the mail. He pulled open the door. He found another box, another orange, right? And then after that, the year after that, he received a larger box. It was like 4 oranges. The year after that, he received a bag of oranges. I think they were from Florida. And after that, the following year, he started receiving oranges from all around the world. Miniature oranges from Japan, special oranges from Portugal and Spain. Different years, he would get oranges from different places around the globe. One year, he received oranges from Africa somewhere. He received oranges from South America and etc. And he kept wondering, there was never any return address. He kept wondering, who was sending me all these oranges, right? And then one time he came home and he said, well, here, let me pause a second. Does anybody here within seeing this post remember a company called Mission Pack? It was like a Harry and David sort of thing. They had all these specialty fruits and nuts and stuff like that, all really, really fancy stuff for Christmas. I remember in Mission Pack, the only thing we could afford, my mother bought 1 box of dates, right? Stuffed dates and glazed and all that. And we each got 1 date because that's all we could afford from that store, right? But we used to get a catalog every year because everybody did. And I used to thumb through the catalog and look at all the good things in there. And on the back, towards the back, there was an offer from the Mission Pack company saying they will give you one box of everything in the catalog for a certain amount of money. I've forgotten what that price was. It was either $600 or $900, something completely out of reach for us in those days, right? Well, Steve went home before one Christmas, and he said he walked in the front door and someone had sent him that particular offer from the Mission Pack. He got in one box of everything that was in the catalog. He had bananas, stuffed dates, he had nuts of all kinds, he had oranges, he had apples, all sorts of delicacies. He said there was so much junk in his house he couldn't move, right? Couldn't even walk through his own living room. He said, this is ridiculous. I gotta find out who's sending this stuff, right? So he called the Mission Pack company and he said, hi, my name is Steve, Inglewood, California, like that. And somebody sent me all this stuff and I want to know who sent it. And the lady on the phone said, I'm sorry, sir. We can't give out the names or addresses of our customers. And Steve said, okay, well, how about this? I will give you my name and I will give you my phone number. Can you call your customer and ask them to call me? And the lady said, yes, we could do that, right? So a few days later, Steve wasn't home. The phone rang, his wife answered, and somebody said, identified themselves as the person who had sent the Mission Pack delicacies over to the house. He said he wanted to talk to Steve. Wife said he's not home right now. And so they set a time and the guy was going to call back later, right? Steve came home. The guy called and they were talking this, that, and the other thing. And the guy said to Steve, he says, I just want to be clear. You were in Sandy Fork in 1940, Christmas time? And Steve said, yeah. He said, you were the guy that passed out all those oranges? And Steve said, yeah. He wondered what was coming. And the guy said, well, if you don't mind, Steve said, why are you sending me all these oranges? The guy said, I'll tell you, but if you don't mind, I'd like to tell you in person, if that's all right with you. And Steve said, sure, I guess so. He said, but why? And the man said, I want my son to meet you, right? Story gets me. On the appointed time, this man showed up and he had a boy with him. He was about 10 years old. And they sat down in Steve's living room and they were just talking this and that. And the guy said to him, Steve said, why are you sending me all these oranges all this time? Man said, I'm going to tell you, but before I do, could you tell me the story of what you did that Christmas and why you did it? So Steve told how he was putting together, a storage building for the owner of the grocery store there, and how the guy had cheated him, and how the only thing he could take for pay were these oranges, and he had nothing to do with them. He said, I can't sell them, I can't eat them, so what the heck? I thought I'd just give them away as Christmas presents. Probably a good thing to do, right? For that sort of a present that he got. So I told the whole story, and the guy said, didn't you go across the river up the hill there to a house that was on the hill on the other side? And Steve said, yeah, I did. He says, do you remember that house? And Steve said, yeah, I remember it very well. It's a beautiful place. Must have been owned by a wealthy guy. And the man told him, yes, it was owned by a wealthy guy, but we didn't own that property, right? He said it was owned by some rich guy in the city who liked to come out in the summertime and play gentleman farmer, right? He said, we were just staying in the house because my father had met a real estate agent who was handling the property, and the agent gave my father a deal. He said, you can stay in the house through the winter if you keep an eye on the place, right? So the deal was they stayed there, a place to stay when they were pretty much homeless, and they didn't get any pay. There was no food or anything associated with it. It was just a place to stay if they would watch the property and make sure nothing happened to it. No vandals broke in or anything like that. Well, the man's father, had to go off and find work in order to get paid and bring food up to the house and like that. So he wasn't there that particular Christmas. Not there the Christmas Eve, not there the Christmas Day, right? And this guy said, I was 10 years old that year, and I was in that house that day, And that night, my mother was sick with what we later found out was pneumonia. He said, I was really worried. My father was gone because he'd gone off looking for work. He was supposed to bring us back, food and supplies and so forth. The house was big and was drafty and was cold. And I was really worried about my mother, right? He says, I was wanting my father to come home. He said, I went to the window and I was praying for a miracle, something to help my mom and something to get my father home so we could take care of the situation there. He said, then he went to sleep that night and he woke up the next morning and he looked out the window and there was snow all over the place. And he was beginning to worry. He said, I'll never get my mother down out of this place now. And he said, I went to the front door and I went outside and I saw on the porch that someone had left a bunch of oranges and a Christmas card. And he said, I looked up and I saw there was a path cut all the way through that snow. The guy said, I picked up those oranges, I stuffed them in my shirt, took that card, stuffed it in my pocket. I went inside, I bundled up my mother, I got my sister and my little brother, and I took them down off that mountain. We got down to the river, got to the other side, and I started banging on doors, asking people for help. Finally, about the third house, the lady said, I know someone who can help you out. He's a guy down here who has a truck. He can probably take you into the city. Forgive me, folks. So this guy took the family down into the city that was near the Sandy Fork area. And they went over to the county hospital. And somebody there contacted the man's father. And the father met the family there in the hospital on Christmas Day. The man said, we spent Christmas night gathered around the foot of a bed in the charity ward of the county hospital. That's where we were that night. And my little brother was acting up. My dad asked him, he said, what's wrong? My brother said, it's Christmas and we didn't get any presents. Well, father looked over and he said, yes, we did. He took the card, he put it on the nightstand, and then he passed out those oranges. The man said, they were delicious. At that point, back in Steve's house in his living room, the guy's telling the story, everybody was quiet. And then the man's son stood up. He'd be looking about 10 years old, and he walked over to Steve, and he handed him a perfect golden orange. And when he handed it to him, he said to Steve, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for helping my dad. Right? I guess the moral of the story is, you know how they say, when you get dealt a bad hand, you make the best of it, like that. People do random acts of kindness all the time. Just put them out there. They really go farther than sometimes we think they might. They might have better benefits than we were anticipating when we did it. Just put those random acts of kindness out there and let them go. Let them do their work. Let them help people, because that's what it's all about. We're not looking for a return. We're looking to feel good that we help someone out. I like the story. It's probably better told in the book than I just told you here. But I would like to get people to share that story. You don't have to buy the book at all. I just told you the story. If there are any storytellers out there, please feel free to pick up this story and alter it any way you like. Add details, add drama, add color, and tell the story, because it's just I think it's a worthwhile story to pass along to everybody, right? I always thought it was a good Christmas story, and I always wanted to see that it got a bigger audience than it had gotten. Like I said, if it comes back up, there it is on Create Space on Amazon. I'm going to put the address down below if I can in the comments section. Thank you for listening. I hope you're all getting ready for a happy holiday and a wonderful Thanksgiving and wonderful times with your family and friends and like that. I appreciate the fact that you stopped by. I look forward to talking with you next time.